You're looking at something impossible. A ribbon of blue water cutting through one of the driest places on Earth. It stretches for thousands of kilometers through deserts where nothing has grown for centuries. Ghost towns abandoned decades ago are suddenly alive again. Crops sprout where sand dunes ruled for millennia. But this isn't a natural river. It's entirely man-made, built in just 5 years using technology the world has never seen before. And it's dividing the scientific community down the middle. Some call it humanity's greatest hope against climate collapse. Others warn it could trigger an environmental disaster that will haunt us for generations. So what's really happening in China's northwest? Let's find out. Right now, Northwestern China is dying. The Taklamakan Desert, the Gobi Desert, and the Tengger Desert together form one of the harshest landscapes on the planet. We're talking about 1.3 million square kilometers of wasteland, nearly twice the size of Texas, where summer temperatures hit 50 degrees and winter winds cut like knives. But here's what most people don't know. These deserts are growing fast. Every single year, 3,600 square kilometers of productive land disappears under advancing sand. That's an area larger than Rhode Island, gone. Annually, farmland that fed families for generations becomes worthless dust. Rivers that flowed for thousands of years have dried up completely. Wells that used to hit water at 30 meters now have to drill to 300 meters. And even then, they often come up dry. The numbers are brutal. Over 400 million people live in China's water-stressed regions. Entire provinces face chronic shortages that cripple agriculture, industry, and daily life. Ancient aquifers that took millennia to fill have collapsed after just 50 years of overpumping. And climate change is making everything worse. Rainfall patterns have shifted unpredictably. Glaciers in the Tibetan Plateau, the source of most of the region's water, are shrinking at alarming rates. By the early 2010s, the situation had reached a breaking point. Millions were migrating east toward water and opportunity, abandoning villages that had stood for centuries. Food security was threatened. Energy production faltered because thermal power plants lacked cooling water. And the deserts kept advancing. Like a slow-motion apocalypse no one could stop. China tried everything. And I mean everything. In the 1990s and 2000s, they built hundreds of small canal projects. Most collapsed within years, destroyed by sand infiltration and extreme temperature swings that cracked concrete and burst pipes. They tried massive groundwater pumping, which created a different disaster. Subsidence zones where the earth itself sank, swallowing buildings and infrastructure. They built desalination plants along distant coastlines, thinking they could pipe water inland. But the energy costs were astronomical. Transporting desalinated water 2,000 kilometers inland would consume more electricity than some provinces generate. It was economically impossible. Cloud seeding showed promise during wet years. But when droughts hit and there was no moisture to seed, the planes flew uselessly over dry skies. International consultants proposed incremental fixes, better irrigation efficiency, switching to drought-resistant crops, managed retreat from marginal lands. But none of it was enough. The scale of desertification was simply too massive, too fast. Every solution was either too small, too slow, or too expensive. And then, in 2017, Chinese engineers proposed something that sounded insane. Build an entirely new river system from scratch. The Hexi Corridor Water Transfer Project, that's its official name, is one of the most ambitious engineering undertakings in human history. The goal? Create an integrated network of canals, pipelines, and reservoirs stretching over 1,200 kilometers through Gansu province and into Inner Mongolia. Now, I need to clarify something. The sensational 5,000-kilometer artificial river you might see in viral videos is an exaggeration. What China actually built is a complex water transfer network. Multiple channels, not one continuous river, totaling about 1,200 kilometers of primary infrastructure, with thousands of kilometers of secondary distribution channels. Still massive, but not quite the single mega river some outlets claim. Here's what they actually did. Starting in 2018, engineers began constructing massive pumping stations to lift water from the Yellow River and smaller tributaries in eastern Gansu. The main channel runs westward through the Hexi Corridor, one of the driest regions in China. with annual rainfall sometimes below 50 mm. The engineering challenges were insane. They had to carve channels through shifting sand dunes that can migrate 50 meters during a single sandstorm, build in seismically active zones where earthquakes regularly exceed magnitude, 6 designed for evaporation rates so extreme that 30–40% of water can disappear on hot summer days. Create pumping systems powerful enough to move millions of cubic meters uphill against gravity. The main channel is 8 to 12 meters deep in most sections, reinforced with concrete and polymer linings designed to resist UV degradation and temperature extremes, ranging from 30 degrees C to plus 150 degrees C. Automated sensors monitor water quality, flow rates, and structural integrity in real time. Solar farms cover sections of the channel, generating power while reducing evaporation. By 2023, the first phase was operational. 680 kilometers of primary channel, delivering water to previously bone-dry areas of western Gansu and eastern Xinjiang. Let me show you what's real and what's hype. In areas where the water system is fully operational, the transformation is genuinely remarkable. Satellite imagery from NASA and the European Space Agency confirms significant greening along the main channels. Vegetation indices have increased by 40–60% in zones receiving water. The city of Wuwei, historically plagued by water shortages, now has reliable supply for its 2 million residents. Agricultural production in eastern Gansu has increased by 35% in 5 years. Crops like cotton, corn, and vegetables now grow in fields that were recently sand. Local ecosystems are responding. Bird species that disappeared decades ago have returned. Groundwater levels in some areas have stabilized after decades of decline. Dust storms, those massive clouds that used to shut down entire cities, have decreased in frequency by about 20% in affected regions. The project has created real jobs. Over 100,000 people work in construction, maintenance, agriculture, and support industries directly tied to the water system. Towns that were emptying out have seen population stabilization and even growth. But here's where it gets complicated. The costs are spiraling. Initial estimates put the project at 65 billion yuan, about $9 billion. Current costs exceed 120 billion yuan and climbing. Maintenance is far more expensive than projected. Pump failures, polymer lining degradation, and sand infiltration require constant, costly repairs. The energy bill alone is staggering. Running the massive pumps requires approximately 2.8 billion kilowatt-hours annually, roughly equivalent to the output of a medium-sized power plant. That electricity has to come from somewhere. And right now, much of it comes from coal, which means carbon emissions that partially offset any environmental benefits from greening. Evaporation losses are worse than models predicted. In summer, some sections lose 35–40% of their water to evaporation before reaching their destination. Engineers are scrambling to add shade structures and floating solar panels to reduce losses. But it's an expensive race against physics. And there's salinization. Desert soils are mineral-rich, and when you add water, those salts leach into the channels. Early agricultural zones are showing concerning salt buildup in irrigation water, which over time can poison crops and soil. It's a problem engineers knew about in theory, but underestimated in practice. Here's something the promotional videos don't talk about: displacement. Building this water network required relocating approximately 23,000 people from villages along the planned routes. Some were compensated and moved to new housing. Others, particularly in ethnic minority areas, have reported forced relocations with inadequate compensation. In Gansu's rural counties, where many residents are Hui Muslim or Tibetan Buddhist minorities, local communities have complained that they weren't properly consulted about construction that destroyed ancestral lands and religious sites. These stories rarely make official media, but international human rights organizations have documented them. The project has also created new inequalities. Areas close to the main channels receive water and prosper. Villages just 30 kilometers away, outside the distribution network, see no benefits, and continue struggling with water scarcity. It's creating a two-tier system: water haves and water have-nots. Water doesn't respect borders, and this project is causing serious international tension. The Hexi Corridor system draws water from the Yellow River and several smaller tributaries, including streams that flow from mountains shared with Mongolia. Mongolia has filed diplomatic protests, arguing that upstream diversions are reducing flow into rivers they depend on. Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are watching nervously. While this specific project doesn't directly impact their water supplies, they see it as a precedent. If China can build massive water transfer systems to reshape its geography, what stops them from diverting international rivers in the future? There's also the broader geopolitical dimension. China's Belt and Road Initiative includes plans to export water transfer technology to countries in Central Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, facing similar desertification. Some see this as genuine climate cooperation. Others see it as water diplomacy, China positioning itself as the indispensable partner for nations facing water crises, creating dependency and political leverage. I've read dozens of peer-reviewed studies on this project, and the scientific consensus is, well, there isn't one. Dr. Liu Changming, a hydrologist at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, has published cautiously optimistic assessments. His team's models suggest that if maintenance costs can be controlled and evaporation reduced through technological improvements, the system could be sustainable for 30 to 50 years. But Dr. Ma Jun, director of the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs in Beijing, has been more critical. He warns that the project addresses symptoms, water scarcity, without tackling root causes, inefficient irrigation, water-intensive crops in arid regions, and unsustainable development patterns. You can't engineer your way out of every problem, he wrote in a 2023 paper. Sometimes you have to change how you live. International experts are divided too. A 2024 World Bank report praised the engineering achievement while questioning long-term economic viability. The UN Convention to Combat Desertification has remained carefully neutral, neither endorsing nor condemning the project. The most concerning scientific warnings involve climate feedback loops. The water system depends on glacial melt from the Tibetan Plateau, but those glaciers are shrinking due to climate change. Some projections suggest key glaciers could lose 50% of their mass by 2050. What happens when the source dries up? Additionally, the massive evaporation from the channels, billions of cubic meters annually, is changing local humidity and rainfall patterns in ways that aren't fully understood. Some climate models suggest it could actually decrease rainfall in adjacent regions by altering atmospheric circulation. In other words, trying to fix water scarcity in one place might worsen it somewhere else. Here's what I think after researching this project for months. The Hexi Corridor water transfer project is neither the miracle its promoters claim, nor the disaster its critics fear. It's a desperate measure taken by a country facing genuine crisis, using the only tool they have at the necessary scale: massive state-directed engineering. Is it sustainable long-term? Probably not in its current form. The costs are too high, the environmental risks too serious, the dependence on shrinking water sources too problematic. But is it saving lives and livelihoods right now? Yes, absolutely. Millions of people have access to water they didn't have before. Farmland that was turning to dust is producing food again. Towns that were dying are recovering. The real question isn't whether this project is perfect. It clearly isn't. The question is, what else could China have done? When conventional solutions fail, when millions face displacement and starvation, when entire regions collapse economically, do you accept slow decline or take a massive, risky bet on engineering? There's no good answer, only hard choices. Phase 2 is already under construction. Plans call for extending the network another 400 kilometers westward into Xinjiang by 2028, potentially irrigating another 500,000 hectares of desert. But there are signs the government is reconsidering the scope. In 2024, Beijing quietly scaled back some expansion plans and redirected funding toward efficiency improvements in existing sections. They're adding more solar panels to reduce energy costs, experimenting with different polymer linings to cut maintenance, and testing subsurface drip irrigation to reduce evaporation. Meanwhile, other countries are watching closely. Saudi Arabia, facing its own water crisis, sent a delegation to study the project in 2023. Several African nations have expressed interest in Chinese technical assistance for similar systems. Australia, battling its own desertification, has commissioned feasibility studies on inland water transfer. The Hexi Corridor could become a template, for better or worse, for how humanity responds to climate-driven water scarcity in the 21st century. An artificial water system stretching over 200 kilometers through one of Earth's driest deserts exists. It's real. You can see it from space. Water flows through channels that human beings carved where nothing grew for centuries. Has it greened the desert? In some places, yes. Is it sustainable? We don't know yet. Will it become a model for the world, or a cautionary tale? That depends on whether engineers can solve the cost, evaporation, and source dependency problems before they become catastrophic. One thing is certain: this project represents a fundamental shift in how we think about geography. For most of human history, we adapted to where water was. Now, we're moving water to where we want it. That's either brilliant or dangerous, depending on how it turns out. The desert doesn't care about our ambitions. It only cares about physics, chemistry, and time. And time will tell whether human engineering can truly overcome nature's harshest environments, or whether we've just bought ourselves a few decades before the bill comes due. What do you think? Is this the kind of bold action we need against climate change? Or are we creating problems we can't even imagine yet? Drop your thoughts below. And if you found this story as fascinating as I did, subscribe. Because whether this project succeeds or fails, it's going to shape how we fight desertification, manage water, and think about engineering for generations to come. The story is just beginning.